Modern Vintage Radio.
Welcome to the Podcast Planner podcast. This show is all about podcasting with a content creation focus because content matters when you're sharing your voice with the world. So what's the purpose of a compass if you don't know your destination? Do you know where you'll be with your podcast a year from now? Okay, maybe a year is too far. How about 3 months from now? These are the questions that I'll be helping you answer by walking you through how to measure what actually matters when it comes to podcasting. Back in episode 7, which covered the core basics, we discussed goals and even brought up the acronym SMART. Of those letters, we covered S for specific, A for attainable, R for relevant. In this episode, we'll finish off the letters with M, measurable, and T for time-bound. Fun fact, all that I'm sharing with you is packaged neatly for you inside the Podcast Planner. We now have up to 3 different versions. They have templates, focus exercises, checklists, and more to help you with podcasting. You can grab 2 free templates when you join the VIP email list or when you grab the complete planner. Just visit thepodcastplanner.com. Now back to creating your podcast compass. What do you want for your birthday? When we're asked this type of question, so many exciting present ideas come to mind. So I ask you this, what do you want your podcast to gift you? Feel free to run wild with your imagination, write it down, doodle it out on paper. Now take a step back and let's get real with some of those goals. Let's not get it twisted. I'm not saying to not be a dreamer. I'm one myself, but we need to start taking steps to make the big dream happen. You know, like a spark to make the fire happen. Let's take the birthday list as an example. We have the list of present ideas, but which ones are the ones that will truly make you happy? It's what you do with that list of ideas that matters and ends up being your present. To get the ones we really want, we start the process of elimination. The same goes for your podcast. What do you truly want out of your podcast? After all, you're spending a lot of time and effort and really putting yourself out there, your voice out there to the world. What do you want it to give to you in return? Because the next thing you know, you look at that calendar and realize, wow, I've been podcasting for a year. Then the next observation is, what are the results? Do those results match up with what you intended? Some of those results may bring a big smile to your face, and some may not. This is why it's important to consider what actually matters to you and your podcasting efforts. So the question then is, what should I measure that actually matters to me when podcasting? Well, no podcaster is the same. So when considering what matters, it can be a lot different from, let's say, what I want. Also, think of what you can control when it comes to getting results. To help you out, here are some common things to measure when podcasting. Number 1, happiness. How happy are you planning, recording, and publishing your show? Number 2, the content. Do you feel your content is getting better or is it getting worse? Is it still enticing for your audience? Speaking of audience, number 3, the download numbers. How many download numbers do you want? This is a very common thing to measure, but I would recommend focusing on number 4, which is audience engagement. How many individuals have you interacted with that listen to your show? It's one thing to have a lot of download numbers, and it's a whole other experience knowing your listeners. Hearing back from them, listeners becoming friends. Again, the experience. Number 5, social following. Again, kind of a numbers thing, but how much has your social following grown? This is on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, your email list. So looking at the platforms that you've put yourself on, has that social following grown since you've launched your podcast? Number 6, opportunities. How many opportunities have happened to you as a result of your podcast? And number 7, money. How much money have you made as a result of your podcast? These are just some of the things to measure when it comes to podcasting. Please add or eliminate the list to reflect what matters to you. I'll tell you how to break them down here in a moment. Of the ones I mentioned, I believe most of those matter. It's the download and social following numbers that I feel are more of a vanity factor than anything else. I don't really care for them, but I am aware of them and look to push them further. When it comes to measuring what matters, we have to consider quality over quantity. Not to mention that both are completely subjective, which is why I'm asking you that as we go through this episode, to reflect your goals and measurements of what matters to you. And to take it a step further into that, this is why it's very important to align yourself with a proper audience, your ideal listener, because not everyone is supposed to like your podcast. Not everybody's supposed to listen, like, interact, either you and your podcast. So let's review some of these common things through this whole quality versus quantity outlook. Number 1, downloads and engagement. On one side, you have a lot of downloads, but no engagement. A sense of wrong audience. You can't seem to connect with any of them. This is quantity over quality. Now let's flip that. On the other side, you have a little downloads, but those who do listen to your show are of a high caliber, attracting top people in your niche that wouldn't even know you if you didn't have a podcast. And with the cherry on top, they even engage with you as opposed to the opposite. So this is quality over quantity when it comes to downloads and engagement. Now let's look at social following. On one side, it's not huge, but it's growing, and you're getting engagement and converting your reader into your ideal listener. This is quality over quantity. And then on the other side, it's huge, but you keep getting spammed with direct messages on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. You keep getting these weird tags. Believe me, I've been there. And even your email list, you get these weird opt-in people and they quickly opt out and they have this weird feedback that doesn't really relate to what you're offering. So again, this is quantity over quality. Are you even attracting your ideal listener, your ideal audience, that ideal person for you, your brand, your podcast, and the message that you're sharing with the world? Now let's look at opportunities. You have all these numbers that start to trickle down into very interesting things. I'm going to look at it in the perspective of quality, because the opposite of these opportunities is no opportunity. Again, you have these huge numbers, right? Social media, email lists, download numbers, but are the opportunities coming into you? Are you being invited to be a speaker on some big brand or event? How about getting a paid traveling gig or vacation? There's other opportunities like interviews on other shows, book deals, movie deals. These are opportunities that are a result of your podcast, as opposed to just having these crazy numbers, and yet you're not getting anywhere really connecting with the right people, and the opportunities aren't just happening. And last but not least, monetization. This is kind of a subjective field, and it's a little different for everybody because whether you're podcasting as a hobby or podcasting for business, this is a little different for everybody, but I have to mention it because I believe monetization is important. So you have on one side, lots of sales with little profit, quantity over quality. Then you have little sales, but a lot of profit. You're attracting the right person and they start to give referrals. Next thing you know, it just kind of has a ripple effect, a domino effect. This is quality over quantity. And then you can look at monetization in a different perspective, right? Money is money. If you're earning a couple dollars here and there with your podcast, hey, at least you're earning money. And then again, there's the other side of the coin when it comes to monetization. Here you have all these download numbers, but there's no money coming in because your audience is not responsive to the ads. It's not responsive to all the affiliates that you're trying to throw at them. It just makes no sense. There's no connection. You're offering the wrong thing to them. That all comes through eventually. So monetization, are the opportunities there? Is it quality over quantity? Also, it's perspective and subjective. So is it possible to have quality and quantity at the same time? I'm going to get a little Disney here, and the answer is yes. But it all starts with what we started in this podcast Compass series. It's about being intentional of attracting your ideal audience to have your podcasting dreams come true. Okay, Now we have a great idea of what we personally want to measure. Next, we have to put a time frame to it. There are 2 effective ways of doing this. Number 1, reverse engineer your measurements. You start with a year from now of what you want, and then you break that down into 6 months, and then you break that down one more time to 3 months. So this is reverse engineering what you want, starting what you want a year from now, and then after you write that out and what that looks like to you and what you want to measure, you break that down to 6 months. And then you do the same thing, but once again for 3 months. So now you have reversed engineer what you want to measure. The second way of doing this is building up to the year. So instead of reversing it, you just simply start with, what do you want 3 months from now? Okay, and then you start to write again, what do you want 6 months from now? And then what do you want a year from now? So you build up to it. And you can do this all in one shot, or you can do it as you go. This is building up to it. So I personally like reverse engineering what my goals are, so it gives me something to aim for, and it really pushes me beyond the limits that I thought was even possible. It's very exciting to see these things come to fruition because I set out these goals and then I try to push to them and try to see what can I really accomplish. And sometimes I either end up exceeding what I had written down, or as a result of me having this effort looking towards these goals, other very surprising opportunities start to happen. Before I move forward, it's also very important to write these out as statements. So you start off these goals and these measurements by literally writing down, 1 year from now, my podcast will fill in the rest with your goals. And then you do the same thing for the 6 months. In 6 months, my podcast will, and then you fill that in. And then the same thing for 3 months. In 3 months, my podcast will. I have just found it more effective when you write these down as actual statements rather than just a list of goals. And there you have it for measuring what actually matters when podcasting. Number 1, what to measure. Measure what matters to you. Number 2, quality over quantity. Number 3, time bound. 3 months, 6 months, a year. And here's an extra tip. As you reach each stage, the 3rd month, the 6th month, the full year, always evaluate and refine where you're going with your podcast using your podcast compass. All right, our next episode is the last of our podcast compass series. That's right. We have one more thing to add to our podcast compass. Can you guess what topic that is? It's a hot one that I mentioned earlier. Monetization. Whether you're podcasting as a hobby or as a business, I believe you can and should make money as a result of your podcast. Join me, will you? Hey, thank you for listening to the Podcast Planner Podcast. This episode was written and produced by Addie Saucedo. That's me. For more episodes, freebies, and information, please go to our website, thepodcastplanner.com. If you like the show, please tell anyone that is interested in podcasting, or leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. You can follow me on social media, just search Podcast Planner. Since this show is in a series, you should subscribe to the show to make sure you get all of the episodes. Our supporters are Spreaker, Podfest, Podbean, Team Podcasts, Podcaster Society, and Podomatic. Until next time, plan, record, and share your voice with the world. A host is in some ways the compass and soul of the show. Michelle Norris. Thank you for sticking to the end.